telephone. And it is 1 minute to 7. We are going to start. Good evening. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of South San Mateo County, I welcome the candidates, and I welcome you, the audience, particularly on such an important night for the baseball team. I'm very proud that you've done your civic duty and turned out. Welcome you to this free public forum for the Menlo Park City Council. My name's Ellen Hope, and I'll be your moderator this evening. A few words about the League. The League of Women Voters is a national nonprofit volunteer organization of women and men. Our education mission is to encourage your active and informed participation in government at every level. The League does not endorse candidates or political parties. Our sole interest is in helping voters gain fair, unbiased information in order to make an informed decision on Election Day, November 8th. In addition to this forum, I encourage you to visit the California State League of Women Voters election website, votersedge.org. That's votersedge.org, for information about all of the candidates and the measures on your ballot. To begin with, I'd like to ask everyone to turn off their cell phones. We'll be taking questions from the audience, and we ask that you submit written questions using the 3x5 cards available from our volunteers. Please raise your hand if you need a card to submit a question. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement, 2 minutes for a closing statement, and 1.5 minutes to respond to each question. A League volunteer, Joanne, raise your hand, will with her stop sign, will monitor the time. As far as questions are concerned, I also would like to mention that every candidate answers every question, and we don't take questions that are targeted at a particular candidate. There are 2 seats to be elected to the Menlo Park City Council. There are 3 candidates. They're Ray, is it Mueller or Miller? Ray Mueller, Cecilia Taylor, and Catherine Carlton. And they're seated in random order. They drew numbers before the meeting started. And Ray is now going to begin with his 2-minute opening statement.
Hi. So I just want to thank you all for coming here tonight. There's a lot going on television, and I think everyone probably, if you're here, you probably watched the debate last night, so you have got your fill of public policy this week. So thank you for coming. My name is Ray Mueller. Just professionally, a little bit of resume background. I'm a graduate of the College of Natural Resources at UC Berkeley. I received my law degree from Hastings College of the Law in San Francisco. Professionally, I worked in public policy. I worked for Joe Simidian as his chief of staff, Supervisor Simidian. Right now, I'm currently working as a vice president at a machine learning company here on the peninsula. I'm a father of 2, an 11-year-old and a 7-year-old growing up here in Menlo Park, and a husband to my high school sweetheart who keeps our life in balance. I was elected to the city council in 2012. I was the mayor in 2014. And I'm running for re-election. Really, frankly, I could give you a bunch of the pitch, but the real honest right down to it is I really love helping my neighbors. I love, in office, I've made it a point to, on a regular basis, hold office hours all over the city. And it's really those interactions with neighbors, working with them, trying to solve their problems that just makes this job for me so much fun. When I was growing up, I always dreamed of having a law office and growing up on Main Street and getting to help my neighbors. And I really enjoyed that aspect of that job here in Menlo Park. So there's lots of public policy things we'll talk about tonight that are really interesting. But when you get down to it, it's really just a love of public service and working with all of you that has me here tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Cecilia?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. I am Cecilia Taylor. I'm a resident of the Belhaven area. My family moved here in the 1950s. Both my maternal and paternal grandfathers made their home in Menlo Park. My grandfather bought a house in 1959 on Hollyburn. In the 1970s, my mother purchased a house just a block away from him. So my roots are definitely in Menlo Park. I live at ground zero for the biggest changes in Menlo Park. My neighbors want a seat at the table. They want representation when the big decisions are being made, and I am the fresh perspective for the City Council. I have made it my goal to help educate my neighbors on the power of civic engagement and encourage them to actively participate in the meetings and events that shape the present and future of Menlo Park. I know civic participation is a powerful tool, a tool that has the power to influence and enhance the state of our neighborhoods and our general quality of life. I am running for City Council because it's been 30 years since Belhaven has had representation on the City Council, and I am running because my heart belongs to this city. Thank you.
Catherine.
Hi, thank you all so much for coming tonight. I'm also a mother of 2 young children, and this is why I want Menlo Park to be absolutely the best place to live, to work, and to visit. We're a vibrant, safe, and fiscally sound community, and thankfully we are moving even further in that direction. I'm really proud of what we've achieved, which has been the result of a lot of teamwork. I've enjoyed working with and talking with our neighbors, as well as residents who have volunteered as individuals, as commissioners, as committee members, and working alongside the dedicated colleagues on council, as well as our colleagues in other cities. Things are finally moving in a positive direction. Crime is down, the balanced budget is a beautiful thing, and I'm working to meet the needs of an ever-changing community, from young families to retired people. But there are a lot of things that we still have to accomplish. With my finance and business expertise, my extensive experience volunteering in the community, and my experience on council, I know that I have the skills necessary and respectfully ask for your vote to be reelected so that I can bring these projects and goals to completion. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. We'll start the questions now. When we do questions, we begin first with Ray, then with Cecilia, then with Catherine, so that it's a round, it's a rotation. So Ray will begin this first question. He has 1.5 minutes to respond. The question is, what is your solution for the housing imbalance that is being created by approvals of so much office development?
Yeah, so it's funny, as a lawyer, you hear the words so much office development. Right now, actually, we went through a general plan process in Menlo Park that I think had over 40 meetings of visioning, and what we tried to do is actually put in quite a bit of housing in that, and also put in, then put in development so we can see economic growth. There's a number of strategies. So I served on the Jobs Housing Task Force for San Mateo County, and there's a number of strategies that you can work on to get more affordable housing. One of the things that's really important right now to get affordable housing is to vote yes on Measure K, because that gives the county money that can go ahead and work with nonprofits, provide to nonprofits, so you can get affordable housing starts. One of the issues that you have right now is even if you want to build affordable housing, it has to be funded. So you need funding for that. The other thing that we can do is we can do below market rate fees when new developments come in. That gets you funding to start affordable housing starts. Obviously, you need to zone for it, and I think while serving on council, we've added more housing, and frankly, and more affordable housing than any council before us, I think in the last 15 to 20 years. But the one thing that I think is really important and critical for this strategy is that Menlo Park does not act in an island. What's really important that we do is that we focus on the region as an ecosystem. You take it and you circle an area, and you say, this is an ecosystem with our regional neighbors. And you go ahead and you create agreements so that you create great transportation, and you create great housing, you create great small business zoning, you create great opportunities for economic vibrancy, and you create balance across the region. Thank you.
The housing jobs imbalance is a difficult challenge because there needed to be policies created prior to things being built. So how do you go back and correct something that's already been done? One of the difficulties about affordable housing is that it has not been defined in the city of Menlo Park. We talk about below market rate, but affordable housing can go as low as someone making $15,000 a year to as high as someone making $120,000 a year. So we first need to define it. In order to solve it, we might need to add in some of our policies that for every X amount of office space we build, we have to build X amount of housing, because the workers need to live somewhere. And if we don't have a place for them to live, we just increase the amount of people who are trafficking through the city, commuters, cut through traffic. So the challenge with solving the jobs imbalance is that we have to go back to what we did from the beginning when we built all of this development. I know that the Bohannon project does not include any housing at all. Thank you.
So Menlo Park's housing imbalance, or lack of housing, is really due to decades of councils not allowing housing development in Menlo Park. We haven't had an apartment building built in Menlo Park since 1974, and we haven't had a large group of affordable housing built, and that in the BMR, which is very defined in Menlo Park, since 1978. So on council, I'm proud that we've worked with residents and businesses to develop appropriate zoning and support investments in real estate. Long delays projects on El Camino Real and Belhaven and throughout the city have added not only transit-oriented housing, market rate housing, but a great deal of affordable housing as well. We now have 885 apartments being built in Menlo Park, with almost 200 affordable housing units being built in there. The proposed Facebook homes would be on Facebook property, which not only will provide housing for the people in Facebook to be able to walk to work to help with the traffic, but also a large portion of that, I believe it's 250 units, will be affordable housing, or BMR deed restricted, which is for 55 years. Housing is an issue of regional significance, though, and we need to work together with our partners to find a solution in the same way that Redwood City, the county, and Menlo Park came together to build the affordable housing residences for seniors, which provided 90 units on Willow, not to mention what we've done with the veterans and the Veterans Hospital. We're moving in the right direction. We need to keep this momentum going.
Thank you. We'll start the second question with Cecilia. What would you do to provide space for more schools, playing fields, and libraries for the city's 50% growth from the new general plan? None are in the plans.
Thank you for the question. In order to provide more space for our children to play, I'm looking at specifically at Onetta Harris, a facility that is not only outdated, but doesn't have enough services for the community. We can take a space like that, redevelop it, and make it a two-story, where you'd have multiple faceted community center. You could have a library on top, then you can have a community center on the bottom. You could also utilize the space more over at I believe it's the tennis area, where I've rarely seen anyone use. That's one area with Onetta Harris. Looking over here at the Burgess Park, it looks like that all of the space is being utilized. I'm not sure where else we can use. Maybe someplace in Sharon Heights there's space available. I know that we have served a lot of space in Belhaven for the needs of every place else. So I think that we need to look at other areas of Menlo Park that have space available that can be utilized for all of the children in our city. Thank you.
Well, first I have to explain, I'm kind of a greenie from way back. I was the administrator for the World Parrot Trust. I'm a master composter. I teach composting. I worked with rats, Raptors of the Solution, to make our parks safer. This is an area that I'm extremely passionate about. We must preserve and maintain the precious parks and open spaces that we have in Menlo Park, whether it's a park for our children to play, tot lots, places where we have movies available for people to come together and build community, places where we ride bikes. It's all an integral part of our community, and it must be preserved and used at its fullest. As we require people in Menlo Park to limit their lawns, it becomes even more precious to have open spaces and areas where children and people can play and enjoy nature. Part of doing this, I've banned the toxic chemicals in parks to make sure that where tots and children are playing, it's safer. We've banned the use of pesticides for rats to make sure that the pesticides don't get into the wildlife, to preserve the wildlife. It's important that we continue to anticipate the need for maintenance and change, whether that's Local Park, Kelly Park, Tinker Park, or whether that's Bedwell Bayfront Park and the open spaces in that area. I'll make sure that we have the plan and the budget in place to keep the city's environmental infrastructure safe and our parks and our open spaces in good condition.
Yeah, so it's funny because, so actually, the general plan wouldn't plan for schools. So school districts plan for schools. The general plan actually plans for growth. They're two different things. So the school district master plans for schools. So to correct that clarification of the question. But nonetheless, right now, actually, it's a very interesting time for the Ravenswood School District because a lot of people don't know this, but they're actually under capacity. So their schools are under capacity, so much so that they're not even using the flood site campus anymore. So when people talk about the impact on schools, there's actually facilities in place. But what the problem is that the facilities in place actually need a tremendous amount of capital improvements. So the bonding capacity in Ravenswood School District actually is quite low. They have a $300 million shortfall. That's why earlier this year I came forward with a plan to create a joint powers agency that would bring into account Menlo Park, Palo Alto, San Mateo County, East Palo Alto, and the Ravenswood School District, where we could go ahead and take what's called ERAF funding, that's Education Revenue Augmentation funding, which is a formula that the state basically every year they give they give schools a carrot. If you hit your academic marks, you get this extra funding. If you don't, that funding flows back to local regional jurisdictions. So every year in Menlo Park, the city of Menlo Park gets ERAF money because Ravenswood didn't hit its targets. So what I'm proposing is Menlo Park and all of these local jurisdictions actually take that money and instead of waiting for the chicken and egg, give it back to Ravenswood so they can go ahead and make the capital improvements. If we do that, we're going to see those facilities actually used properly for students today. And then with respect to parks, real quickly, we have got to do a better job of making Bedwell Bayfront Park accessible to residents and make it actually more interactive. Actually put a ranger station there.
All right, so this one will start with Catherine, unless I've lost count, which is always a possibility.
Didn't I just answer the first one?
No.
You answered the second
Oh, I
one.
answered second. Okay, sorry.
You've answered the second one. So Ray started one, Cecilia started one, and this is yours to start.
Okay.
What support do you believe our small businesses need to thrive in the city?
Well, the first thing you need when you've got a small business is customers. And a lot of the work that we're doing, whether it's the Chamber of Commerce, the city, the businesses themselves, is a lot of marketing to bring people to where the businesses are. And then once they're there, you'd like them to stay in the area so that they can visit more than one small business when they're in that area. So in focusing on doing this to downtown, we've installed really nice-looking bike stands. We've allowed some fun new businesses and brought in some really great mixes like Refuge and Mademoiselle Colette. We've installed outdoor seating for businesses so that the restaurants can have outdoor seating. And even one company that isn't a restaurant wanted an outdoor area to be able to show off their furniture and get involved and create excitement about coming downtown. We've installed infrastructure to support new plants, new benches to make the area look better. We've had events such as outdoor movies, and the survey showed that 80% of the people that came to the outdoor movies bought food in downtown. So that's fantastic. So once we bring the people down, we need to keep them there. And one of the things I've worked hard on is exchanging 2 hours free parking for 3 so that people have a long enough time to be able to have their hair done, their nails done, lunch, and be able to stay and shop downtown and not feel like they have to race back to their car. If we want foot traffic, we need to invite people down and actually give them enough time to stay and shop. Businesses told me that people used to run out halfway through because, oh, I have to go get my car. And now I'm hearing that the small businesses are really benefiting from having that little bit of extra time and the vibrancy downtown to bring them there.
Right. So in 2014, this was actually a major thing I wanted to focus on. And I actually, at the time, I actually asked the city council to create a small business commission. Didn't work out that time. People didn't want to dedicate resources to it. So what I did was I started having small business roundtables, bringing in small business owners from all over the city. We'd meet, and we would meet quarterly to talk about how we could go ahead and spur small business. Out of that process, a lot of great ideas came. One of those, frankly, at the time, was out of that generated the idea to start the the pilot out in front of Left Bank for the outdoor seating, which later, not after that we put that in, expanded to 7 places all around the downtown. But the other thing that I think was really important and promoted during our specific plan review this year was the fact that we actually need to go ahead and protect retail spaces and zoning, specifically in our downtown. I'm very concerned about places like Oasis and other that are just, well, that's a restaurant, but retail downtown, really protect that. We have to go ahead and make sure that we have protections in our zoning. We talked about doing that in our specific plan review, and we've asked staff to bring that back to us. The other thing I'd say that really is, that's actually really important to talk about is that you have to do a really good review of what makes an area vibrant. So what we did was we went, while I was mayor, we looked at San Carlos, what they were doing, because everyone was talking about how wonderful San Carlos is. And what we realized was that San Carlos has way more restaurants than we do. So now we're actually really focused on trying to figure out how we get more restaurants in the Menlo Park. But the last thing I'd say is you have to give something to do besides go out to dinner and shop. So I've been really pushing for us to get an entertainment venue where people can, if I go out to dinner with my wife or my kids, I can do something after dinner. I'm not on an island and it's time to go home. So thank you.
Yes, small businesses in the downtown area specific, I've actually reached out, or actually 2 of the people there reached out to me. One of the challenges with the downtown area is that there's too many things on the sidewalk. So it makes it inaccessible, especially for people who are older or use walkers or use a cane or are visually impaired or using a wheelchair for transportation. So I think we need to look at a little bit more specifically what certain businesses need. I think the downtown caters more to the newer style businesses and leaves the older businesses out. Speak more specifically, we could talk about Ann's Cafe or Ann's Coffee Shop that's down there. It's been there, I believe, for almost 70 years. And if you look at the front of it, you can tell it still looks like it was 70 years ago. And so there needs to be something there available for her to be able to rehab the front of her place so that it would look appealing. We need to look at the classic areas of Menlo Park that have been ignored. We cater to the franchises. We cater to businesses that cost people a lot of money to go there. But there's still a quality of life in those small businesses that have been around for years that we need to pay attention to. Also, I'm looking specifically about the Belhaven area. There's concerns there as well. There's a franchise there that's complaining that certain development has limited how many people come there. And so we just need to talk. We need to create some type of subcommittee and discuss it and find out what our small businesses need and want. We need to listen to them. Thank you.
Okay, so we're starting again with Ray. The question is, Menlo Park School District is one of the highest rated in the state. However, part of the city is in Ravenswood, which is not doing so well. Would the city council advocate sorry, I'm having trouble with handwriting. It's my eyes, not the handwriting. Belhaven community has been asking for some time to be moved from Ravenswood to Menlo Park School District. How would you address this issue?
So this is actually an issue I've worked on quite a bit. So it's no secret the members of the city council for years have said they want the merge of the school districts. It goes back and forth for decades. As a council member, when I first came into office, I realized that debate was taking place, and it had been taking place, but every generation of student still was being left behind. Nothing was coming as about. So what I decided was I was going to try to focus on improving the Ravenswood School District right now, so that while that debate's taking place, at least I'm moving the ball forward on helping the students in the school presently. So the first thing I did was I came up with an idea, well, let's try to capture all the economic benefit of the cars going by, so maybe we can put electronic billboards up and give that to the schools, that money. That went nowhere. People didn't like that, which is fine. So then I started to really work on trying to drill down on what is an issue that's really affecting this district. And that's when I started to get very involved, actually was serving as mayor, going to town halls, working with kids and families in the district, and I discovered just how what bad shape these schools were in. I mean, you literally had closets that were full of asbestos, boilers, next to library rooms, and there was just a grate in between the two. That thankfully has been fixed recently. I saw that fixed. But I really just started to delve in and see just how bad that funding shortfall was for capital issues, and that's when I came forward. I went and actually found a law firm in San Francisco, Eric Carrington and Suffolk, to do the work pro bono to show that we could form a JPA in order to help try to address this issue. Thank you.
Can you repeat the question, please? Sorry.
The gist of it is that the Belhaven community, parts of the Belhaven community have been asking for years to be moved from Ravenswood to Menlo Park School District. How would you address that?
I was actually educated in the Ravenswood School District, and unfortunately, I did not make it in the Ravenswood School District. And so it is a deep concern of mine. I visited my old school, Belhaven, about 2 weeks ago to look to see what's needed. The biggest concern for the principal is that they cannot attract quality teachers because of the salaries. It's not necessarily the facility, but it's what's happening on the inside of the facility. And talking to the residents in Belhaven, they are adamant about coming out of the Ravenswood School District. Putting money in it, I don't think is the actual solution. I think that Menlo Park needs to create equity throughout all of its city for education for all of its children. So Menlo Park School District can absorb temporarily the Belhaven school and then allow Belhaven residents to create their own school district if that's what they need. I don't necessarily believe that staying a part of Ravenswood is the solution for our school. The part that really, really touches my heart is that people who do not have children in that school district volunteer and they advocate for the kids there to get an equitable education. So I believe that the Menlo Park School District can temporarily absorb the school and that the residents can create a district to continue what Belhaven students need. Thank you.
Catherine.
Okay, so I have to admit I'm biased about education. My mother's a teacher. I have 2 elementary school children, and I actually was president of the Las Lomitas Education Foundation to raise money for schools last year. When I first came to Menlo Park, I was an after-school volunteer helping kids at the Boys and Girls Club do their homework. I was a tutor volunteer in the area to try and help the kids. Right now I'm working with the Boys and Girls Club. I've brought the Tech Challenge to them, and I'm working with them on girls in STEM projects to help the kids that go to the Boys and Girls Club be able to move ahead and learn new skills. I'm frustrated that I am not legally able to make the decision about whether the schools merge or not. That is not within my legal ability to influence. What I can influence is the conversation. And at every opportunity, I encourage and will even help sponsor, will host, getting together the parties that can legally make this decision and encourage them to come together with something that's going to provide a better outcome for the students, because whatever's happening is not getting better fast enough. We need to do this now, because every day, every week, every month, these are children that need to be educated, and that's critical. And I applaud Ray, and I thank him for including me in the project that he's doing to create better facilities. And I've been working on a kindergarten to college fund that has been done in other cities, which has also shown to tremendously help children in their academics as well as their vision to graduate from high school and go on to further education.
Thank you. Cecilia, we'll start the next one with you. The fire district and the city do not have a good relationship. What do you intend to do to try to fix that relationship?
Well, I've already started talking with the fire district. As a CERT member, it is very important to have a decent facility, a facility that can handle all of the amount of growth that's happening in the Belhaven area. Right now, we have just under 6,000 people who live there. We have well over 8,000 people who work there. So you can do the math and figure out what one fire department is facing every day. And I believe that we can work on the problem. From my understanding is that the city is leasing the land to the fire district. and the fire district wants to purchase it so that they're able to renovate and build so that they are at full capacity to service the community that they're in. Thank you.
I'm not even sure how to answer the question. It kind of, quick story. I remember last year when I was mayor, I was having lunch with the fire chief and 2 people on the board. And we were working things out and talking through what we needed to do. And somebody came in and showed me a newspaper that said, fire board and city council, can't communicate. And we all had kind of a chuckle. In fact, I'm having lunch with Harold, the fire chief, on Thursday, and spoke with some of the people at length at the pancake breakfast on Saturday. We're negotiating through and we're working on things. My grandfather was a fire chief. Again, this is an issue that I'm hugely passionate about because it's just basic safety. It's basic common sense. And we're actually working these things through and working together and finding common ground and solutions because, of course, we want to have the absolute best facilities to keep people safe. One of the things I've worked on passionately on council is creating Menlo Ready and extending our emergency preparedness programs. And part of that is working through and finding common ground, which is what we're working on. And sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree, sometimes we agree and disagree on council. I agree and disagree with my husband. But we all work it out and we all move forward because we're all on the same side of the fence and we're all working to make sure that people stay safe and we support and keep people safe in a scalable fashion that we need in Menlo Park.
Yeah, I wouldn't describe our relationship with the fire board as negative as that question. And frankly, but to the extent there have been issues that from time to time where sometimes people lobby each other with newspapers. It's an unfortunate practice, but sometimes they do that. But in this circumstance related to the fire station, frankly, it was just a lack of communication. And if you go back and you look at what happened after that occurred, you'll see that the fire district had indicated that they wanted to purchase the property, but didn't indicate really why. And then the communication going back and forth was actually poor. And that happens sometimes because we're limited by something called the Brown Act. So only 2 people can talk on council to each other, and then only 2 people on their side can talk to each other. So sometimes you end up playing this really odd game of telephone where you can only talk to one person and you're kind of trying to figure out, you're relying on staff to tell you what's going on. In all reality, what ended up happening was the reason why they wanted to purchase the property was because they wanted to expand it outside of its current property lines. Well, we didn't know that. We thought we were giving them a deal by saying we'll lease it to you cheaply. So they got frustrated because they said, wait a second, we want to expand outside our property lines, and if you lease it to us, we can't do that because by law you're not allowed to combine parcels if you're leasing. Well, once we figured that out, we said, okay, well, bring the issue to us again. You didn't tell us that. And it's one of those things that's really important to understand in public policy that I always say is that you have to remember to be compassionate and be able to forgive because sometimes people jump to conclusions. Thank you.
Okay, Catherine, you start this one. We often hear about the need to, this is in quotes, preserve the character of Menlo Park. What is your position on this, and to what extent do you support changes to zoning code that may increase the availability of affordable housing but change this character?
Along the same lines we were talking before about communication, we work with the residents and companies and different public entities to facilitate communication and doing effective outreach where it's necessary. There's still a growing number of people, and actually a growing majority of people, as shown in the last Measure M, who actually really want development. They want measured, intelligent development, but there are always people who want no change. The city's worked with residents for years to receive and include their input on how the downtown corridor should develop. We spent 6 years putting together the specific plan that was passed in 2012. And this has enabled 2 hotels, a couple of condos, mixed-use development of apartments, shops, restaurants, even a dog park in El Camino. And we're currently working with businesses and residents and other interested parties to update our zoning in the M2 area to allow and encourage for such things as transit-oriented housing to help the transportation issue, as well as putting in the structure and the mixed-use zoning to enable things like nice grocery stores, pharmacy in there, the shops and the things that we need to make sure that we have vibrancy throughout all of Menlo Park. And it comes down to prioritizing the needs and wishes of each person and each group and facilitating a lot of communication in the process of determining what can and should be done.
Right.
Can you repeat the question?
I think so. We often hear about the need to preserve the character of Menlo Park. What is your position on this, and to what extent do you support changes in zoning code that may increase the availability of affordable housing but change this character?
Wow. So there's a lot of assumptions in that. So I actually have spent a lot of time on working with residents to try to preserve pieces of character in Menlo Park. And I get teased about it often. Like a good example is the Foster's Freeze. When that started to go, I tried to find a location because there were a lot of residents who cared about that and had memories connected to that. So I tried to help find a location for that. I couldn't, and now I'm working with a member of the board of the Little League and a member and a local architect who grew up in Menlo Park to expand the Burgess Park Snack Bar to capture some of those historical elements. And there's examples of that all throughout Menlo Park. But I think what's really important to understand is that we are going to continue to grow. Nothing that we do is going to stop population growth. And what's really important when you're talking about the character of the city, it's not, the buildings are going to age. They are. What's important about the character of the city is the strength of the spirit of the people within. How do we treat each other when we make these decisions? How do we act neighborly? How do we, when something comes up and we are making zoning decisions, do we make those decisions with both good policy and good perspective in the community? And I think that that's really important to remember because a good example, right? You don't want to have a community full of buildings that are falling down and aged and no longer, and say, well, that represents what this community was. That's not what this represents community was. We can grow together and still have that sense of community in our town.
Cecilia?
Yes. I believe that preserving the character of a neighborhood is something that the community has to be involved in. One of the biggest challenges that I've seen in the Belhaven area is engagement. There are almost 6,000 people there, but if you look on the Connect Menlo website, I believe that they were able to survey about 300. And there was not even a way to determine if all of those 300 residents were actually members of the Belhaven community. Right now, we have lost our privacy in our backyard because of the development. And so it's very frustrating. And only certain areas of Menlo Park is experiencing the growth. Only certain areas. And so when you talk about preserving the neighborhood, you have to really take time out to see what the residents want. What do they want to see for their community? I think it's shameful that we were able to do development in areas and we neglected basic infrastructure for our kids, and specifically safety. Safety is a big problem in our area. The children are unable to cross the street because cars are blocking the intersection and they cannot see the pedestrian sign. So when we talk about preserving our community, we need to think about infrastructure and we need to think about the safety of our children first. Thank you.
All right, we have a rather different question here. JobTrain operates to help those within Menlo Park and East Palo Alto who need to attain or regain skills to enter the workforce. Today, a great many community members have been turned down and told they do not qualify for JobTrain programs as they are too old, or because the only classes that are being offered are for those for whom English is a second language. With the influx of gentrification in the Bay Area, constant rent increases, and the lack of affordable housing, many adults over the ages of 40 are in desperate need of the services that used to be provided by JobTrain. How do you propose working with those currently running JobTrain to ensure fair services for all community members in need? That's you.
Well, to be honest, if that's accurate, the question's accurate, I didn't know it. So whoever submitted that question, I really hope after the discussion tonight that you'll come talk to us. because if that's occurring, we need to sit down with Job Train, and if they can't serve that population of residents, we need to find someone else who can. And that's basically the conversation that we need to have with them. It's about sitting down with communication and figuring out what resources go to Job Train and to cover that population. And if they're not there, if it's not adequately being addressed, finding another service provider who can. And I agree with the premise of the question. If that's occurring, we have to find someone who can. It just is not. Right now, the issues identified with respect to displacement and people who need to be retrained for work are real, and we need to address them. And I really appreciate the question and someone raising the issue, because I had not heard that issue before tonight. So thank you.
Yes. So I actually tried to take a class at Job Train about 1.5 years ago once I returned to Menlo Park, and I was turned down. And I don't know why I was turned down, and I didn't ask. I figured it was because I already had a degree, and one of their goals and their philosophies is to service a community that does not have adequate access to education. So they're there to house education for people in the community. Now, if this problem is persisting, then we definitely need to speak with the director. I know that they have a fairly new director there now. And one of the pieces that people probably do not do sometimes is actually read their own philosophy. Maybe they need to read it to remember why that they're there. And then also people need to make complaints and let people know what's going on in the community, because Job Train, used to be called OICW, has been there for many decades, and there's no excuse for them only teaching classes in Spanish and also turning down people who are over a certain age. It's supposed to be for the community, and therefore the community needs to stand up and say, we're not going to accept that from you. And if they continue it, then we figure out a way to have that person removed from their position. Thank you.
I was also not aware that Job Train was turning people down on this level, and thanks for bringing it to our attention. I assure you further conversations will follow. Just throwing it out there, the unions also have an apprentice program for people that are interested in learning skills on the building trades and other trades along those lines. There are other groups, nonprofits out there to help guide in the right direction, but I agree that if Job Train isn't meeting the needs of our area, we need to certainly sit down and have that discussion with them further. One of the other things that I'd looked into at one point was having classes at the Belhaven Service Center, and had brought it up to one of the people from a local community college about maybe they could look into seeing if there's a common class that people from this area are interested in. Would they be interested in having some classes in the service center, some training classes, some areas to help the people, even if it's job preparing classes. They actually have classes on putting together better resumes, better skills in looking for jobs. There are a lot of different areas where the City Council doesn't have a direct ability to influence the policy, but we definitely have the ability to directly influence the communication and the conversations that happen, and put pressure to help people better the needs of our residents. And I'm happy to help facilitate those conversations.
Thank you, Catherine. Got two related questions on traffic and infrastructure. Given the amount of development taking place in Menlo Park and the entire peninsula, many residential streets have become alternative routes for extreme cut-through traffic. Residents are told that something will be done, but the problem continues to grow. What will you do about this problem? And the related problem is, the related question is this one. The general plan proposed would increase jobs by 70%, but those businesses usually don't provide sales tax revenue. How would you get new funding for the infrastructure needed, and how would you maintain it to support the big growth of our town? Cecilia.
On the first part of the question with traffic and infrastructure, one of the suggestions that I made, and this was in response to the Facebook EIR and also the Connect Menlo EIR, was that we needed signage in certain communities to deter people from using our streets. I saw when the creek was done over on Marsh Road that there were signs that said road closure along Bay Road, and I have family there, and people did not use those streets. In the community where I live, in Belhaven, there's a sign up that says no left turn, and people make the left turn every day, and there's never an officer there to issue tickets. And so in certain areas, people pay attention to the signage. In certain areas, they don't. So I believe in that certain communities, like in Belhaven, that we need to put signage up. We also need to enforce the law there, that people are not making left turns, and encourage people to use Bayfront. Bayfront is made for that traffic. Stop using the area where people live to cut through to get closer to the bridge. Thank you.
The problem with traffic is it's regional in nature. Over 70% of the traffic on El Camino Real is pass-through traffic, and over 80% of the traffic on Willow is pass-through traffic. As an example, people from Los Altos going to Redwood City. And it's very difficult for us to impact that. If we try and impact that as an individual city, we're putting Band-Aids on a much more large problem. And this illustrates that if we don't collaborate with our meaningful cities in a meaningful way, we're really not going to be able to fix this problem alone. We do things like the 101 Willow Overpass, researching into the Dunbarton Rail. If we can get the Dunbarton Rail, when I say rail, it'll be 15, 20 years before this really comes to fruition. In my mind, it might not be rail. It might be a electric mobile people mover. But the idea is that we need to help get people off of Willow, off of Bay Road, and moving more efficiently across from the other side of the bay. And we can do that. We have the technology. We need to get the plan together, and we've started that plan. We've started the research to basically make that into a reality. We also need to make it safer and easier for people to ride bikes and walk where possible in Menlo Park. This deals with childhood obesity. It also deals with traffic. It helps make life enjoyable to be able to have a safe way to get across town, whether you're an adult or a student. And we've implemented green paving, safe routes to schools, new sidewalk to this end, but there's a lot more to be done. We have to work collaboratively with our fellow cities to find a good solution. And the funding question, just really quickly, we do have tax in lieu for people that don't generate taxes, and we have a tremendous amount of impact fees, including traffic impact fees, to help put in these mitigations to help make the situation better. But it's going to take a larger regional solution.
All right, so first I'm going to acknowledge right off the bat, Dunbarton Bridge Corridor is broken. Absolutely broken. Every day cars back all the way into Menlo Park. They're all the way down the freeway. And what I've asked for in our general plan process, before the general plan comes to us, I've asked city staff to arrange a meeting with our congressional legislators, our state legislators, and Samtrans officials, get them all into a room before December, because right now when things are messy is when we can get things done. We can fast track things, and that has to happen. It has to happen. That's happening right now, irrespective of what we do in Menlo Park. I see the Dunbarton Bridge Corridor as an equity issue. It's an absolute equity issue because you have 10,000 car trips a day going down Willow, east of 101, and you have the same thing happening on University in East Palo Alto. And what should have happened, and needs to happen is you need to have a smooth connection from the Dunbarton Bridge all the way to 101, where if cars want to go into Belhaven or go into East Palo Alto, they have to take an off-ramp. Otherwise, it smoothly connects to the 101. Money should have been spent on that a long time ago. With respect to revenue, folks, so there's always a discussion about sales tax revenue when we have this issue. Number one, we will have sales tax revenue coming out of the general plan. There's a big right now we have biotech producers who frankly are constrained by the current size that will have recurring sales tax revenue. Secondarily, property tax is the biggest contributor of tax to the city of Menlo Park. we're going to see plenty of property tax, and we have transportation impact fees. Finally, I've already said multiple times at City Council, it's time we started protecting our residential neighborhoods from cut-through traffic and looking at ballards and things that other cities have done, like Palo Alto and around the Bay Area, to protect their residential neighborhoods from cut-through traffic. Thank you.
All right. We have a question about high-speed rail. Do you support the use of Prop 1A bond funds to electrify Caltrain? And Catherine?
I think the electrification is a good thing. It's going to allow the trains to move more frequently, which will encourage people to ride. It will make things quieter, but I also am a fan of doing the grade separations to make sure that as the trains come through more frequently and potentially more silently, faster, we need to make sure that people are safe at each one of those separations as they move from east-west. One of the things that was really highlighted when we did the research is people are concerned. They want to make sure we have good east-west connectivity. And part of that is traffic, and part of that is safety. And we need to make sure that people can safely maneuver, whether it's their car, their bicycle, walking from one side of Menlo Park to the other. And this is why I was so passionate that Stanford will put in the undercrossing for bikes and peds at Middle, not only so that people can more safely get across to Burgess Park, but people can more safely get across to school. It's imperative that we make sure that as new technologies come in, that we make sure that safety is our first priority. And as we do this, just for the record, I'm absolutely not a fan of having Menlo Park being a passing lane. We need to keep our tracks at 2. So thank you.
Right. So far off the bat, I don't support high-speed rail. It's antiquated technology for the use. And I also think that the funding that's being spent for it, we would have been far better off as a state to use that money toward higher education. It's baffling to me that we're putting money into that project right now with the state of our university system. That being said, the Prop A1 funds are there, and we would be remiss not to take advantage, because I frankly don't think the funding will ever be there to complete this for the entire state, so we'd be remiss not to take advantage of this opportunity to electrify Caltrain. I absolutely agree with Councilmember Carlton. The real crux of this issue for Menlo Park, while people want to debate whether or not you want to do electrification, where you have to keep your eye on the ball is where is the passing track. Mm-hmm. If the passing track is in Menlo Park, that's going to take numerous properties on Alma, and basically you'll have, I think it's up to 4 lanes of passing for trains, and there's only 3 places on the peninsula that can do it. Menlo Park is one of them. That's where we have to keep our eye on the prize. So anyway, thank you.
I'm a person who actually uses public transportation, and I've always looked at and thought about ways where we can actually do better. Because of all the traffic, it's very difficult to get around our city, to get around the Bay Area. I don't think that high-speed rail in Menlo Park is actually a solution. I think that if they are going to have high-speed rail, we could actually maybe start it in some place like San Jose, because they have more of a hub for their train stations down at Diridon. The other piece to this is if we talk about electrifying the trains, that would be better for us in the communities. I've also lived next to a train track before. It is not very pleasant. And I think that we have to engage the people who live around the tracks to ask what they want. And also make sure that we engage people who utilize the services. Too many people make decisions about public transportation that do not utilize public transportation. And we need to engage people who are affected by it. Thank you.
All right. Next question. The city will receive over $180 million in impact fees from the development in the M2 area and an extra $16 to $20 million in ongoing annual taxes. What is your plan specifically to develop the projects prioritized by the Belhaven neighborhood? And how will the public know how this money is being spent? And Ray, that's yours.
Well, the process has to be transparent, and in terms of the question's kind of a trick question. to tell me how I'm going to prioritize how the money's spent in Belhaven. That's really a question for the Belhaven community. So we need to sit down with the Belhaven community and say, this is the money that's coming from this. And the Belhaven community can explain to us how we need to prioritize that. So, and the issue needs to be absolutely transparent. And our budgets need to be transparent to make it absolutely direct where the money is coming in from the city and how much money is being spent in different areas of the city. It's, you know, I've asked for that numerous times of our city manager. And, you know, frankly, as a city council member, you know, it was my first year on city council when the capital improvement project list came up and the police station was being dropped from it. And at that night, I raised bloody murder. I was very upset. I said, we have to get a police station that can't be dropped from it. We need to put it back into the budget. And if you go back and look through the press at that time, that's actually what led to Facebook. I actually got an email from Facebook one night that said, we hear what you're talking about, we want to help. All of that devolved into the police service station being opened in Belhaven. Right now, we're looking at the Onoda Harris pool, and we're doing a master plan on that. Not a lot of people know that, but that pool is being used so beautifully by the community. We're looking at how we can go ahead and expand services there. And I constantly, Supervisor Slocum's staff is constantly reaching out to me and saying, there's an issue with the library here, or I hear from residents saying, there's an issue here. I'm very focused on trying to work with Belhaven residents, but it's the most important thing is that there be community engagement. And we spent a long time on an engagement process with Belhaven to go ahead and try to figure out what those prioritization are for future projects. Thank you.
If you look at the Connect Menlo, you will see a list of what the community has asked for several years. And if you drive through the community of Belhaven, you will see what it needs. If there is an obvious disparity with Belhaven, and we can start with Onoda Harris. That facility needs to be updated. It needs to be expanded. We need to look at what we're offering to our community. First of all, I won't say the only, most of the activities that our youth are being exposed to are related to sports. What about things that are science related? What about things that are not sports related? Every child does not like sports. So we need to look at what services we are offering there. And also, if we look at infrastructure, again, safety of our children, 39% of all bike and pedestrian accidents occur within a quarter of a mile of a school. Why is it on Willow Road I cannot find a crossing guard? There are basic things that are needed in Belhaven. So I can easily tell you what $180 million would do. I could tell you what $18 million would do. It would provide a less of a gap in the budget that goes towards Belhaven. Belhaven is missing a lot of services, and people have been asking for it for more than a decade. And I can go as simple as a bus shelter. Thank you.
I agree that children, not all kids, are great at or enjoy sports, which is one of the reasons why I've worked to bring the Tech Challenge and Girls in STEM program to the Boys and Girls Club. We've done a great deal in Belhaven, really through the visioning process, which was the process of doing outreach and meeting extensively with the people, the residents, the people who work in Belhaven, as well as the people who live in Belhaven, to identify what their priorities are and what they would like the city to focus on. Some of the things coming out of that was the community garden, the mini grant program, creating the new neighborhood service center, which arguably has helped us lower violent crime in the city by 40%, and crime has been lowered across the city by 12%. The community resource fair, improved signage and street lighting, Chilco Street improvements, the swimming pool that you bring up. When I was on the Parks and Rec Commission, one of the residents came to me and said they were really interested in the swimming pool. It was never open. I worked really hard to make sure that that was opened and available for people. We brought in actually an Olympic woman to help coach at the swimming pool, and we've pushed even further. Now it's open all year, and now we're looking, it's being so used and so loved, we're looking at expanding out those facilities to make sure the pool can handle it. With all these is a good start, but we absolutely have a lot more to do. There's a lot more on the list, whether it's the bus shelter, whether it's helping with the traffic. There are programs for the schools and the students in the areas, working on the zoning, providing better facilities, whether it's pharmacies and grocery stores. There are a huge list of things that we still have to do. We are remiss for decades in addressing some of these, and they can't be fixed in a year. But we're definitely on the process. We're moving in the right direction, and we will continue to do so.
This next question also touches on Belhaven, and I'm frankly a bit confused because it asserts something that I had understood otherwise. The question says the Belhaven community has no public library. How do you justify expenses, repeated expenditures on the main library when a large part of the a large community in this city does not have access to a city library in its own neighborhood, specifically Belhaven and the Willows neighborhoods? So, Cecilia?
Currently, the Belhaven Library is attached to the Belhaven School. It used to be open, I believe it was about 7 hours a few days a week, and also a few hours on the weekend. Now, the principal has asked that his school uses a library during school time, which for me personally, I think it's fair. I don't think that I need to be using a library that a 7-year-old is using at the same time. And this goes back to the disparity in Belhaven. Belhaven does not have adequate services. If we need something, we have to travel outside of our area to get anything met. And you'd imagine if you need to use the library and you need to drive over on Willow and you need to come to the library here, how long that may take you depending on what time of day you try it. So as far as a reason why this is, it's called disparity. Belhaven has a lot of disparities that have not been given full attention. That's just a fact. You can drive through the city and see it. If you look at the new walkway that's along Chilco, if you look at it, development is happening on one side of the street, not both. Thank you.
Well, if you look around most cities, not every neighborhood has a library. In most cities, you do have to travel somewhere to go to the library. But saying that, I'm happy that there is a library in Belhaven, and I don't think it's adequate. I've said that before, I'll say it again, and I'll keep saying it until we do something about it. I don't believe it's safe to have adults going into a library in the school and on many levels. And I've spoken to Matt Henry some time ago. He had a great idea about how Onetta Harris could be updated and expanded to have a library at Onetta Harris, because I think if we're going to have a library, it's more appropriate to have a real library and let the school library be a library. And I'd like to see the library, as we build it, as we develop it, to be a bilingual library, because we have a lot of people in the Belhaven area who would really enjoy to be able to read Harry Potter in Spanish. And we need to support all people in our community and make sure that they have that available for bilingual children, for people that want to make sure that they have bilingual books to raise their children in a bilingual environment, as well as adults. So this is one of the areas that I 100% support and think that this is something we need to address in the short term, because everybody should be able to have books and encourage their own education, whether they're children or adults at all levels.
Thank you. Cecilia, I think you start this next one. How?
I didn't get a chance to answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's all right. The library
Please go.
the library is definitely an issue that I've dealt with as a city council member. The hours have moved around periodically depending upon the year. Oftentimes been asked by different people to go and talk with staff and get that readjusted. It's an interesting situation in that there was an agreement between the city and the school where the school is actually getting paid to have that library open. Now they want to go ahead and have a different arrangement, and so we need to find a facility to go ahead and put the library at. And you know, it's funny. It's not funny. That's a bad word. It's sad, frankly, that we are in the position that we are in the library. And if you look at, it's kind of like the same evolution of the police station. It took a long time just to get an adequate police station. Now we have a service center. We still don't have a freestanding police station. We need to get a library. At one point, that site that was along Willow Road was actually a site that was going to be half police station, half library. It got caught in a very long time with the person who owned it and the city trying to work out how it was going to be developed. And that's why this problem persisted so long for a number of years. That being said, now that we have this issue taking place with the school really isn't sure if they want to keep it a library anymore, one of the options would be obviously to go ahead and try to take space at Onetta Harris. And we're looking at that, but we don't want to interrupt other programs. Onetta Harris is very well used. So it's an issue that's really important. There's no doubt it's important. It requires our city councils in focus, and I appreciate people raising it. But and I want to make sure people understand it's something that we have been focused on and working on already, trying to figure out how we solve that problem.
Thank you. Catherine, I think we start the next one with you. This is about affordable housing. How will you plan to support affordable housing in Menlo Park, specifically for our low-income families and for our senior residents?
I believe for affordable housing, we need to have a three-pronged approach. We have to work with the public entities, we have to work with the nonprofit and the private to put together and work together. And affordable housing, we have the program in place. When we have large developments, whether it be Greenheart or Bohannon or Facebook, there is a portion of that money that goes into our BMR funds. Frankly, I don't want the money in the funds. I want to see, where possible, the units actually built. And one of the advantages of having mixed-use zoning is that as you build a lot of retail or restaurants, or if there's units of homes being built in there, they can actually produce the affordable housing and not just put the money in. And a good example of us working together regionally, because housing is a regional issue. People live in one town and they work in another quite often. And a good example of that is the housing on Willow. Redwood City actually helped pay for the 90 units of BMR housing, of affordable housing on Willow. Redwood City and the county and Menlo Park and Mid-Peninsula, and I think a bank helped, and everybody came together to make that happen. Another example is the Veterans Administration housing had a group of people that got together. Currently, I'm working with HIP Housing and the county on an apartment building that's just over the border in East Palo Alto. Again, we can work together to hopefully be able to buy this apartment building and preserve that affordable housing. And once we buy it, we can deed restrict it for 55 years. So for 55 years, it will continue to be low to very low housing in cost as it is now. Sorry, I ran out of time.
Right.
Yeah. So affordable housing obviously is a tremendous issue, not in Menlo Park, but just in the Bay Area generally. I served on the San Mateo County Housing Jobs Task Force. Also, I'm a board member at Life Moves and Vision Shelter Network. The displacement that's happening right now, there was a terrible article. I don't know what that is. I apologize. Stop the clock.
That works.
So one of the things we need to do, obviously, it's like a three-pronged approach. You need to build more affordable housing. And to do that, it's really, again, I talk about Measure K again. We need Measure K funds for affordable housing starts. It's really important. We need to figure out how to preserve affordable housing. We just absolutely have to. Displacement is happening. We've asked staff, and I started asking staff early last year to come forward with strategies that we could use to go ahead and prevent displacement. We absolutely need to do that. And then, you know, very frankly, an idea I'm kicking around now, and I often float ideas, is I really want to figure out a way that we can help those who do get displaced. At Life Moves, one of the things I've discovered is that when families get displaced, they have no nest eggs. It takes them a very long time to try to figure out how there's no safety net. And so I'm trying to figure out, from a public policy perspective, how can we build in a safety net so that if through this process people slip through, is there a way that we can have something to help people who get displaced? And I think that that's really important because we're going to use our best efforts to try to obviously build affordable housing to prevent displacements, but that's still not going to present it. We're not going to be perfect. And so in those circumstances where people end up displaced, how do we help them? And so some of the ideas I'm kicking around is a displacement fund, frankly, that can be dipped into for people when they're adding more jobs in a region, that there would be money going into a displacement fund. So if people would meet certain criteria, they have that nest egg to try to get a start again. Thank you.
One of the challenges with answering this question is that it brings up a whole lot of issues. One is with the affordable housing unit that was built in Belhaven. Unfortunately, we found out last week that the units that are available, I believe it's somewhere between 40 and 45, that residents in Belhaven who are on the verge of being displaced will not have priority with those units. And that's because the guidelines that are being used for that, it is true. The guidelines that are being used for that is based on BMR, below market rate. And below market rate is for purchase and not rental in the city of Menlo Park. So again, I say we need to define affordable housing by policy in the city of Menlo Park. Below market rate right now in the city of Menlo Park is for purchase. So we need to do something more, and it only talks about very low income. More than just very low income people are being displaced. The second piece is the 2 displacement studies that were done in our city only covered Belhaven. The assumption is only Belhaven residents become displaced. That is not true. You need to do a displacement study for the city of Menlo Park, and you will see that there are a lot of elders who are on the verge of being displaced that live on this side of Menlo Park. The next that we need to do is we need to expand services so that it includes preserving people in their property. Thank you.
Catherine, did you speak? You've spoken to this one. All right, so Ray, you get to start the last one. This is a much broader, more general question than the ones that we've been dealing with. What do you think is the biggest problem facing Menlo Park today? And Ray, this is you.
Wow. Generally speaking, so I think of the world in ecosystems. And so if you think of Menlo Park as an ecosystem, the issue that we have as it relates to housing, all of these issues we've talked about tonight really relate to a very aged infrastructure. We have a 50-year-old infrastructure, even older, but basically really 50 years old if you look at different parts of the city, that has been constricted by the way that we think of cities. We think of us as, well, we're Menlo Park, and they're Palo Alto, and they're Redwood City, and they're East Palo Alto, and we have this infrastructure that grew up around that, but now we've reached the point where we're reaching the edges of that ecosystem and pushing on each other, and we're still approaching these issues with that 50-year-old mentality. And what we really need to start doing is circling the area and say, this is an ecosystem, what works best for all of our cities in these specific portions of our cities when it comes to transportation, when it comes to jobs, when it comes to housing, and work together to solve those things. So the big issue that when I think of it, it's all of these things are solvable together if we work with our neighbors and we're not selfish. And so the biggest problem really is the infrastructure's aged. It's not adequate anymore, all the way around.
I actually agree with you, Ray. I was asked this question by one of the newspapers at an interview, and at that time I felt that the biggest problem for Menlo Park is connectivity. We're not connected. And we have, I believe, 21 neighborhoods in our city. And we have neighbors who never talk to each other about anything. You would never know that your neighbor was sick if you didn't talk to them. I believe that each neighborhood needs to have some type of hub where we keep communication going. If we have a disaster here, you want to know who your neighbor is. If you have a problem, you'd want to know who your neighbor is. Right now, because of displacement, you never know who your neighbor will be. People are being priced out every day. And there are so many issues that, for me, I think if we go to the simplest thing of just talking to your neighbor and seeing what's going on with them so that we can stay in touch with the people in Menlo Park. And people, there's only a few people who actually come to the city council meetings, that come to the commission meetings, unless there is something affecting them. But those people who come can share the information about those neighbors who don't come. I believe one of our biggest challenges is being connected and staying connected, because Menlo Park, there are many neighborhoods here, but we are one city. Thank you.
And I agree with you on that point. I would say, as a general rule, one of the big things that we struggle with right now is momentum. My great-grandmother used to joke and used to say, snails whizzing by made them dizzy. I was shocked when I was first elected to learn how long it takes to get things done. Things that seem quite easy do take a long time, whether it's through EIR, at neighborhood research, the very necessary communications. It takes a while to get these things done. And tonight we've talked about a lot of the things that we've done. We're on the right path, we're moving in the right direction, but we have to keep the momentum. We can't stop and not finish on the things that we've started. There's nothing more frustrating than $50,000 studies that get shelved. We shouldn't study something we're not willing to act on, unless the study actually shows us that it really shouldn't be acted on, of course. But we look at financial responsibility. We've made government more efficient. We've actually been able to implement things that have allowed us to save 80% on our electric bills, for example. But there's a lot more we can do to make our government even more fiscal responsible and efficient. Implementing online services online, for example, saves money and makes it easier for residents. Ensuring safety for residents. If I had the staff and the money, I would lay out Safe Route to School for every neighborhood, every street tomorrow. But we have to do it street by street, and I get frustrated. We need to finish this. We need to roll it out. There's so much more to do. Attracting more great businesses downtown, finishing the rezoning process, maintaining a positive balance between growth, quality of life, fiscal responsibility, and economic vitality. I'd like to see us keep moving and not stumble and fall, as we've done so many times. We talk about critical things and we stumble and fall, and we need to finish these things that are critical for the quality of life for our citizens.
Thank you, Catherine. We'll go to the closing statements from the candidates now. They have 2 minutes each, and we'll begin at the opposite end with Catherine, and then come to Cecilia and Ray.
Okay, thank you. As I've mentioned, we're moving forward towards a more vibrant city, a safer city with improved long-term fiscal stability. And because of that, we have a lot to celebrate as we continue to get this work done. I am extremely dedicated. I study and read everything. I talk to people. I go out and do extra research. I talk to arborists. I make sure that I'm fully prepared as much as I can, and I take my position extremely seriously. I'm grateful for the support that I've received from staff, from colleagues here and in other cities, and for residents, because this is really nearly a full-time job. Over the past 4 years, I've worked collaboratively to balance the budget, even sent back an imbalanced budget when I was mayor and said, no, this will be balanced. I've significantly reduced crime throughout the city by supporting our new police chief and providing him with the tools and the things necessary to reduce the crime in the city, lowered greenhouse gases, provided larger amounts of market and affordable housing for the first time in decades, which Menlo Park desperately needs. We've made downtown more inviting with new downtown businesses, expanded parking, outdoor dining. We've improved bike and pedestrian safety throughout the city, and we've brought economic vibrancy through balanced growth. I love this community. I am passionate about this community and keeping this city moving in a positive direction. I have the business and the finance background, extensive experience volunteering in this community. I have experience on the city council, and I've dealt with a lot of issues and will continue to deal with a lot of issues in Menlo Park. We've had great successes, we've achieved a lot, but we still have so much more work to be done. These are really exciting times, and if reelected, I will continue to ensure that Menlo Park is a vibrant, safe, and financially sound place for people of all ages to live, work, and visit. It's been my honest and sincere honor to serve on council, and I respectfully ask for your support and your vote to continue the great work.
One of my biggest priorities as a candidate is making sure that we create a policy that is safe routes to school for the entire city of Menlo Park. It will not be by district, it will not be by street, it will be for the entire city, because that is the best that we need to do for our children. Secondly, equity in education. We are in 2016, and we do not have equity in education in the city of Menlo Park. It has to be dealt with. Thirdly, in my neighborhood, the city council is in the process of approving 3 million square feet of office development. The question is, how will Menlo Park grow? I appreciate being here. Thank you, Mr. Mueller and Ms. Carlton, and thank you, League of Women Voters. I appreciate for being here. All the questions that I heard tonight tell me that I live in a city where people deeply care about what's happening. And me as a resident, I care. And a part of me caring is to be active. Whether I am voted in office or not, I will still be active because there are a lot of things that need to be done in our city. And a part of being a resident is being a community servant. And that is who I am. And a vote for Cecilia will give you a community servant. Thank you.
They're good. I want to thank you guys both. You guys did a great job. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for having us here tonight. Menlo Park is a lot of different things to a lot of different people. You know, you can go to all different parts of the city, and people will tell you what it means to them. But there's one thing that Menlo Park is to all of us that I always try to remember, and that's that it's our home. And we're all just neighbors trying to create and preserve a place for our loved ones to thrive in. And that's one of the reasons why serving on city council, I really have tried to make it a point of going out and do those office hours and go out and work with the community and make my cell phone available for people to call me so that I can be accountable and help people in those needs. Because I think that's something that's really important. It's that balance of policy and perspective, so that when we're here on city council and we're trying to figure out the very best policies to implement, we understand the perspective of our residents. We've heard from them. And there's all sorts of accomplishments we've made while on city council, and I appreciate Councilmember Carlton listing them because I'm proud of them. But you know, going forward, the one thing that I would really hope in this process, because you're all here tonight, is that you would hold us accountable to the things that we said during this forum. Push on us. Because elections, this cycle is pretty short, actually. What really matters is that engagement afterwards when we have those office hours, when the election is over, to keep us on track. So I really appreciate you all coming out here tonight, and I hope that I really hope that we can all work together as neighbors to create a vision and implement that vision of a future that serves all Menlo Park residents. Thank you very much.
And we'd like to thank the audience for all your good questions and the candidates for all your good answers. We'd also like to thank Mid-Peninsula Media Center for filming this event. They'll be broadcasting it shortly. It also will be available streamed from the Mid-Peninsula Media Center website. And there'll be a link on the votersedge.org site, which I mentioned earlier, and also a link on our local League of Women Voters South San Mateo County website, which is lwvssmc.org. Thank you so much. Go Giants. Thanks, guys.